And welcome back to Coast this hour. Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum with us, and he's an Idaho scientist in his quest for evidence of Bigfoot. He's turning his sights skyward. He wants to float a blimp over the United States, over the mountain area of the West, and search for this creature. Let's go to Jeffrey right now. Jeffrey, what a novel idea. How have you been, first of all? Jeff?
Yes, hello. There you are.
Hey,
yeah,
there you are. How are you?
I've been great. I've been just fine, thank you. Good to be back.
Excellent. Tell me a little bit about your plan.
Well, the concept is the brainchild of William Barnes that I'm collaborating with, and since his experience, his encounter, he has been brainstorming novel ways to try to get at this question, this mystery, and so this notion of an unmanned aerial drone that could carry sufficient payload to allow very high-end imaging equipment, that is, high-definition optics combined with thermal imaging, was born. And he's had long discussions with many different potential engineers and fabricators, companies that produce this type of aircraft or similar instrumentation. And it's the basis of that. Basically 3 intensive years of work to kind of bring this to where it is. He and I sort of became acquainted about a year ago when he orchestrated a conference down in St. George, Utah, and I and John Bindernagel and John Mainzinski spoke at this public conference where his concept of the Falcon Project was sort of unveiled and publicized for the first time. The involvement of the university, doing this under the auspices of the university, provides us with some real advantages. Obviously, it permits more flexibility in the deployment and in the application of this kind of an aircraft for research and development, as opposed to a private citizen attempting to gain permission to pilot such a drone. So that's where we kind of hitched our wagons together, and the university approved the proposal in concept, and my role as the principal investigator, and the ISU Foundation agreed to serve as the conduit for donations, so that we have the advantage of garnering a tax-deductible status for donors.
That's
but
exciting.
Also to give donors the reassurance that this is a credible, legitimate scientific project, and their donations will be used to this end with the oversight of the university.
Jeffrey, exactly how would the technology work? And, for example, could it find a deer if it's down there somewhere?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the whole point of this approach is in itself not novel. The use of thermal imaging from an aerial vantage to survey wildlife is widely employed by various researchers and agency personnel, and there are even companies that do this on a contractual basis with federal and state agencies. But they're typically the instrumentation is typically mounted on a helicopter or on a fixed-winged aircraft. And the disadvantages there are obviously the expense and the noise and the lack of that vertical perspective, which is so critical in attempting such surveys in densely wooded areas. Helicopters are noisy and
scare them away. Yeah.
Well, exactly. And a fixed-winged aircraft has only a vertical perspective just instantaneously as it's flying over an area, and to survey areas repeatedly, they have to employ these tight spirals, and there's some safety issues and involved with there as well. But the biggest thing is the challenge of trying to see through the canopy, because given the oblique view that you typically have from an aircraft, then the effective density of the forest cover is greatly amplified. With this airship, as envisioned in the Falcon project, you have both the stealth, because it's virtually silent. The engines are very, very quiet, and from an altitude of 5,000 to 8,000 feet, they won't be impacting the natural behaviors of the wildlife below, and they're very maneuverable, and they can hover, and they can move up and down in z-space and zoom in on an object. So the gentleman who is designing the optics, custom design for this specific project, has shown me images, for example, of a similar type of device that was used in NASA on the space shuttle, and when shown images of the International Space Station taken from a mile away, the detail and the resolution was just astounding. So it's not, most people, when they envision a thermal image, it's this sort of featureless, colored blob against, a pink or reddish blob against a cooler blue background, with only kind of ghostly images of the actual objects in view, whereas this device is very different, and the optics, the optical detail is quite remarkable, as well as combining that with thermal register on the object. So
how did you hone in on the area, Jeff, that you're going to float the blimp over?
Well, obviously we have all different places that we can choose, and one of the and obviously the places of choice here in the Western United States and Canada are not a mystery at all. Obviously, we'll use some discretion in deploying the device just to avoid the possibility of individuals trying to thwart or misdirect our efforts, but there are lots of databases that have been assembled by various researchers to identify other areas of interest based on the history of activity and current reports of sightings. That, combined with an understanding of the ecology, the forest types, the terrain. Obviously, we'll select areas that are probably more conducive for the deployment of the airship, where weather and wind, prevailing winds, and so forth, as well as air traffic are going to be most favorable for our objectives. But there's lots and lots of terrain out there to choose from.
Jeffrey, tell me about sightings in that particular region, the key region. Of course, the blimp-based search is dubbed, the Falcon Project?
Well, sure. Well, again, like I said, the region, for now, for our purposes, the target is the entire Western United States and Canada.
Right. But, are we getting a lot of sightings out of there now?
Oh, yeah. There there's continually reports and past sort of historical accounts that come to our attention. John Green was one who was very active in compiling newspaper accounts and so forth, and his database is really quite astounding. I've worked closely with a gentleman who is in the oil and gas industry and uses proprietary software to analyze core data in selecting sites for oil and gas exploration. And he was quite intrigued by the possibilities of using some of his algorithms for discerning patterns in data in the application to the Sasquatch data. And we're hoping to involve him further, but his analyses, in his opinion, based on his extensive and successful exploration for oil and gas, and obviously we're talking about different things here, but the applications have some parallels. He was quite convinced that the majority of these reports suggest a pattern that's very real, that is indicative of the movements and encounters with an interaction with human populations. So, that's one factor we'll take into account, but there certainly will be a number of variables that will be considered in selecting the best areas to focus our attention. And accessibility on the ground is one as well. We don't want to rely entirely. The purpose of this is to survey, and although the Falcon project with its state-of-the-art optical instrumentation will, bodes to potentially produce some very good videographic information, but then that's going to be done in coordination with ground verification teams that will then go into those sites where targets of interest have been identified and confirm through trace and physical evidence the presence of said creatures, and eventually, if that yields consistent results, then we can maybe contemplate moving to the next step, which would be sending a team in with the capability of tranquilization or capture, or at least on the ground observation, documenting the presence.
All right, hold on, Jeffrey. We're going to come back, talk a little bit more. I want to ask you about maybe we should get Goodyear to sponsor the blimp. You never know. We'll be back in a moment, and we'll take your calls with Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum on Coast to Coast AM. Jeffrey, what are your plans? How do you plan to raise the money for this project? You should go on to like Kickstarter or something like that.
Well, that's been suggested to us. There's a couple of disadvantages to Kickstarter. One is that, as I understand it, and I may be wrong, but if the goal isn't met within a predetermined time, then the donations are returned to the donors. And obviously, we want to keep this open-ended so that the research can be ongoing. People are encouraged to, and I can provide information, to contact the ISU Foundation, and an account has been established to receive donations, and donations of all sizes are already coming in. We're cultivating dialogue with a number of private individuals for much larger donations. And we've been in conversations with the media, with cable channel networks who are interested, in fact, vying for the opportunity to document and cover this on a weekly basis, creating a new show that would follow the progress of the project from its conception and through the construction and maiden voyage and the ongoing deployments, and, of course, along the way, reviewing and examining and considering the evidence that motivates us to pursue this line of research. So, it may seem a bit of a pie-in-the-sky ambition, but there is such a huge interest in this topic, and the reaction to this ambitious but kind of novel approach to the problem has evoked a tremendous amount of encouragement and support.
I was somewhat kidding about getting Goodyear to put their name on your blimp, but what do you think?
Oh, we are also addressing corporate sponsors as well. There are some limitations as to the type of insignia that can go on to an aircraft like this, but there are ways to show the logos of various corporate sponsors should they materialize. And a couple of those have already stepped forward and expressed some interest. So that's why I say I think between the media, between corporate sponsorships, and the ongoing support of individuals, I think it's not it's certainly not out of the reach, the realm, very realistic realm of possibility.
It's exciting. You've been doing this for a long time. You're a noted author. You've been on our program for years, Jeffrey. Mm-hmm. This is an exciting project.
It is. It is. I mean, we were very interested and excited at the potential for the outcome of a couple of DNA studies that are currently underway. But this, I think, is the next step. Even if, and especially if, I should say, not even, but especially if those DNA studies confirm the existence of a novel species, the DNA can only tell us so much about it. It can give us a little bit about its phylogenetic history, how it's related, and what its affiliations are to other animals or humans. But as far as its behavior, as far as its ecology and natural history, that's only going to come about through observation in the field. And if indeed Sasquatch exists, then this species is one of a group that are notoriously difficult to to observe in the field. And those are creatures that are very rare, very solitary, very nocturnal, generalized in their habits, wide-ranging through a very large home range. All of those things combined make it just very difficult to study these types of animals. And there are numerous other examples. I often point to, a wolverine. Wolverines remained very mysterious, but the fact that they're susceptible to trapping because they're predatory carnivores and of a different intellectual level than a higher primate, they're cultivated in captivity, and that's actually where if you see a real clear close-up photograph of a wolverine, the chances are very likely, very high, that is not a wildlife shot. That is an animal in a game farm.
Yeah, no, you're right.
An enclosed pen.
That's a tough animal to track down and shoot.
So that's I
think
that's the nature. That's the nature of the beast, and the reason it has remained a mystery. The reason it has remained so elusive. Assuming for a moment that in fact it does exist.
Well, now you qualified that by saying if it does exist. What's your gut tell you?
Well, my gut tells
there's
me,
something out there.
My brain tells me that based on the evidence that there's an extremely high probability. But as a scientist, I have to temper that conclusion with the caveat that obviously we don't have conclusive evidence. We don't have the type specimen that we can pull out of the museum drawer or point to as the definitive proof. But short of that, we have so much very suggestive and compelling evidence in the form of footprints and hair, reported hair samples and possible scat and at least traces of DNA, even that though we haven't got a definitive identity or a definitive sequence from that DNA as of yet. And the eyewitness accounts and the Native American traditions. All these different things that that I address in my book, all these lines of evidence. I can't understand people who, because of the lack of the definitive proof, discount and discredit all this other remarkable evidence that points to the existence of a creature. And it's starting to gain, as I've talked about previously, it's starting to gain some traction in the scientific community. Yeah. I'm certainly not the only person. I'm one of the more visible people because I've taken a much more active role in it. But I work in collaboration with numerous other individuals of varying expertise and background and affiliation, and it's starting to the possibility that there may be relic populations of primitive human ancestors as well as other large apes, like the possibility of a relic population of Gigantopithecus, for example, is one possible explanation for the existence of a large ape in North America. But as discoveries continue to point to a very bushy family tree of hominids and ape ancestors, and more and more discoveries point to the recent persistence of many of these later lineages within that bushy family tree, the prospect of some of these lineages persisting up into the present, like the orang pendek in the form of the hobbit or Homo floresiensis, or the almasti in the form of a relic Neanderthal. The latest discovery of Neanderthal remains were dated to possibly as young as 10,000 years. Well, that's just that's into almost recorded historical pastime. Where that's a blink of the eye in terms or a flutter of an eyelid in terms of geologic time and the fossil record. So those possibilities. Well, case in point, just very recently, a popular science magazine, somewhat on the technical side, is called New Scientist, and their cover story recently was the top 10 puzzles facing human evolution today. And I was gratified when I discovered that one of those top 10 puzzles the editors decided upon, and I'm sure with consultation with other academics, was the question, are there other hominins alive today? Are there relic hominins alive today? And that's the basis, I think, of the context of this search for the Sasquatch.
All right, let's go to the phones now. Let's go to Mark in Bourbonnais, Illinois. Mark, welcome to the program. Go ahead, Mark.
Yes. Yeah, hi. How you doing?
Good
George,
to have you with us. Good.
Hi. Okay, I'll stand still because it's a cell phone. Yeah, we've all been through that before. So,
oh, yes.
Yeah, the cell phone. Bourbonnais, Illinois, and I am listening to you through 1320 WKAN radio.
Super.
Yeah, well, about 65 miles south of Chicago, right near Kankakee, where David Letterman once sent 2 gazebos down here. Anyway,
go ahead.
Yeah, that was years ago. Great guest. Over the years, I've been a long-time listener since 1996 when I was 21 and all that, and heard many things about Sasquatch and all that. But I do pose a question. I did hear about the funding and all that. But I do pose a question, which I think is very good, and I watched shows over the TV over the years and all that. I think, you got a great show. You have more listeners than Rush Limbaugh. You have 20 million listeners. This is the greatest, just like Richard C. Hoagland, former consultant to NASA and former science advisor to Walter C. Cronkite of CBS News. You have the most listened to radio program in the world. I pose just a couple quick questions.
All right, let's get to it, though. We're out of time.
Yeah. Do you really think now, I think they've discussed it already in many places, Arkansas, all that. Do you really think they would let it out? Do you really think they would let it out to where we're not alone? We're not alone when it comes to Mars, other places. We're not alone. Yes, they do exist. There's no doubt about it.
Okay, if we found a Bigfoot, Jeff, would they tell us about it? And by the way, Rush has a larger audience. We're the largest late-night show in the country. Got to get those stats right.
I'm always amused by the stories of black ops and men in black appearing on someone's doorstep and admonishing them to back off or to relinquish their data on Bigfoot, because either I'm no threat or I'm considered a good source of disinformation if that's the case, because I've never been confronted. I've never been accosted by anyone in the field or on the university campus. So I don't think that there's any conspiracy. I don't think that there is any official suppression of information, but I think that there is possibly some institutional suppression, because I've had many conversations with people in various state and federal agencies who, just out of fear of ridicule or job security, refrain from passing along the line of the chain of command any information. I mean, we've been in contact, for example, with numerous rangers in Yellowstone National Park who have shared their own personal encounter stories, or those of park attendees who have encountered something or found.
And they're there all the time. That's dramatic.
Well, right. But then when we had a meeting on occasion with a woman in charge of public relations for the park, and as he always does, my colleague John Myanzinski manages to very deftly turn the conversation to the subject of Sasquatch. She was quite interested and quite intrigued, but she said, but we don't have any of that going on in the park. And John and I just looked at one another, and then he said, well, actually, ma'am, you do, but the employees are afraid to report it up the line.
Mum's the word. That's right. It's like pilots that see UFOs.
Well, right, yeah. It's just when your personal integrity and credibility are called into question because of the stigma attached to the subject matter, then people refrain from sharing with others. John Myanzinski was the brunt of that himself. When 28 years ago his supervisor, as a result of a flurry of sightings and the arrival of men with rifles to hunt the Sasquatch, was assigned by his supervisor to get to the bottom of it and find out if this is a guy in a suit that's going to get shot, or if there's a real threat to people under his jurisdiction. Upon that supervisor leaving, the next supervisor gave them, in no uncertain terms, the instructions that they were not to make any statements whatsoever, any public statements, and if it ever came to his attention that they were involved in any way, shape, or form with research directed to this question, that they would immediately be dismissed. And that was simply because the new supervisor did not want the reputation of someone who considered this a real possibility. He didn't want it to be discredited.
Are you waiting on Dr. Brian Sykes and his genetic DNA testing? Is that who you're waiting on?
Definitely. We tried to steer some of the best samples, the most likely samples, by screening things that were obviously other common forms of wildlife that had just been picked up in the environment there, possibly in association just by proximity to an encounter or credible experience. But the hair is ubiquitous out there in the environment. It persists for a long, long time. And, a witness may see something and then scout around and pick up some spurious strands of hair, thinking that they must have been shed by what they immediately saw. And that could be deer, elk, or bear, or something that's been there for a long, long time. So we tried to get the best samples to him, and he's got those collected and waiting on a couple more. He'll start his testing here shortly, he said, and hopefully have some results before the year's end.
Super. Let's go to Tucson, Arizona. Earl is with us, west of the Rockies. Earl, go ahead. You're on with Dr. Jeff Meldrum.
It's a pleasure, George.
Thank you, Earl. Go ahead, sir.
I've seen a Bigfoot, a Thunderbird, and a dire wolf.
Well, you've seen just about every major creature. Tell me about the Bigfoot sighting.
Come back?
Tell me about your Bigfoot sighting. Well,
Hello?
we'll worry about that later.
Yeah.
I don't doubt he saw something. I don't doubt that.
Yeah.
Let's go to Bob, Pueblo, West Colorado. First-time caller. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, George. Hello, Jeffrey. What if that is actually a spiritual being? Do you really think we will ever actually capture him unless our Father in heaven lets us?
Some people have theorized, Jeff, that these could be extraterrestrials or coming from other dimensions.
Well, that's true, and in the Native American tradition, they are considered something sort of a step above or a step beyond the typical forms of wildlife, and that may well be. I don't intend to disrespect or to how can I say this? I don't intend to disregard those
theories, thoughts.
Yeah, those perceptions or perspectives on the topic, but the evidence that I'm familiar with points to this being a being that is just not, well, I shouldn't say just, but that is a member of the natural world and behaves accordingly.
I would tend to believe that too, Jeff.
Yeah,
I just think whatever people are seeing, it's a physical creature. I don't know how intelligent it is. I don't know if it's the missing link. Ever since I was a kid and I was interested in the abominable snowman story, the Yeti, I was always just hooked on this. And I've always felt that it's an earthbound creature that for some reason we just haven't really discovered yet.
Yeah.
Simple as that. What is that website, Jeffrey, that you wanted us to have in case anyone wants to help donate to this project?
Well, you can contact me directly if you're fine with making the donation through the ISU Foundation. My email is meld@isu.edu. Otherwise, you can also go to the Falcon Project, and it's the-Falcon Project, one word, .com, and there is a PayPal link. Some preferred the convenience of making smaller donations, not worried about a tax
Well,
deduction.
if you had 300,000 people at a dollar a piece, you got it.